So like we've talked about Sonic's 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles, all the old Sonic games. Those are the only ones. So like what's next? Like surely there can't be anything else after that, right? It's kind of weird.
Well, I'm searching like my encyclopedic knowledge of all Sonic things, like my databases, right? And this letter keeps coming up. M?
For Mario.
Oh, are we? Ooh. I don't know if I'm ready to talk about Mario just yet.
I guess we could talk about Sonic Mania instead.
Yeah, let's hold off on the Mario talk. I'm sure we'll get to it at some point. Hi, I'm Crepe.
Hi, I'm Mitt.
Hello.
Hi.
And welcome to Let's Talk About Sonic, the podcast about the Sonic the Hedgehog, who is the hedgehog, who is your hedgehog.
By the podcast, for the podcast.
By the podcast, for the podcast.
Well, there's no podcast to buy. It's free.
Well, I mean, they were talking. It's BY the podcast.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I get it.
It's done by the podcast, and we're doing it for the podcast. And today we're talking about Sonic Podcast, a game that came out in 2017 for modern consoles and PC. Incredibly, all modern consoles, even though the Sonic release track record has been very scattered on modern consoles. It's very funny.
Yeah, and man, because like the timeline in my brain was like, man, I'm glad it came out on Switch. That's kind of weird, but like it came out like right after the Switch came out, so it would have been granted for it to go on the Switch. But it feels so strange that like the Switch was out when Sonic Mania came out.
Yeah, actually, I had to think about that for a sec because I think like my whole perception of the last handful of years is getting real skewed because I forgot for a moment the Switch came out in March of that year.
Yeah, and like personally, I have no excuse to not remember because I went to one of like the Switch preview events. I got invited to it like January before the Switch came out, and one of the games they had on display was straight up Sonic Mania, so I got to play it there. Yeah. I
forgot about that. I'm pretty sure you brought it up at the time.
Yeah, I think it was one of the demos where it was just like an act of Green Hill and then an act of Studiopolis or something like that. I know I played Studiopolis, I remember that.
I think that's right, because that's all we had at the time. I don't think they'd even... Well, maybe by January of that year they'd shown off like Flying Battery. Maybe.
Yeah, because they did start to like slowly trickle out a few zones. A lot of them were in the dark. I remember they showed Mirage Saloon. They showed Flying Battery. They showed Stardust Speedway.
There was this huge like mystery around Press Garden for the longest time because the only thing we knew about it was from like a promotional stand-up that someone took a photo of somewhere, and that was like it.
Huh.
Because we didn't have any clear screenshots. They were not publicizing anything about Press Garden before release, so no one really knew anything about it.
I remember being in one of the computer labs on my campus when the Mirage Saloon stuff came out, I think. So I remember showing it to one of my friends and we were freaking out about it because it looked cool. Yeah,
I remember freaking out about the music, just barely being able to hear the music even a little bit clearly over people talking and stuff and other background noise from preview videos of Mirage Saloon. Because like a lot of the reveal for that zone was through letting people who were like minor YouTube personalities play it, I think, or like showing it off through recordings at like very specific spots where people could come play it, and it still had like microphone recordings of people talking over it.
Yeah, it was that era of Sonic social media promotional blitz where they just got anyone with an audience, including the people who don't like Sonic.
Yeah. Honestly, the lead up to Mania's release was such a good time.
Yeah, I definitely remember it releasing and that being such a very good time because like I wanted to do nothing but sit and play that game, and like once I did and I got to all the zones that they hadn't revealed, and like Hydro City and Metallic Madness were like genuine like pop-off surprises.
Yeah, I feel similarly. Surprisingly, like Oil Ocean was also a pop-off surprise for me, maybe just because it was such an out-there pick compared to everything else that's in the game.
Yeah. It is definitely not one of the popular Sonic 2 zones, I would say. That's not to say it's not memorable, but like I'm surprised if they wanted to put anyone that would be like the fandom Sonic 2 zone. It'd be Mystic Cave.
Yeah, seriously. The funny thing for me in regards to Oil Ocean is that, like, for the longest time, I always felt like I was in the minority for the reasons I didn't like it, which is mostly the level design throwing you all over the place and the visuals. We talked about this a long time ago. But I think most people don't like Oil Ocean because of the enemy placement and the octopus enemies that shoot at you, because they often shoot at you as soon as they come on screen.
Yeah.
And obviously the devs were going to fix that for Mania, which they did. It's a lot easier to handle those enemies even when you don't see them coming.
Yeah, and there's a lot of fun interactions that you can have now with the Fire Shield and Oil Ocean, which I'm also glad that they thought about because that's so much.
Yeah. I have like this weird feeling bubbling up talking positively about Sonic Mania where like I'm really enjoying it and I'm feeling good about it. But it also feels like such well-trodden ground, if that makes sense. Maybe it isn't for like other people who would be listening, but for me, like, I got so absorbed into the game at the time, and even in the years following, that I've gone out of my way to listen to a lot of people talk good about it because it was so like electrifying and enjoyable and happy.
Yeah, it was definitely a big light spot. It was a very nice time to be a Sonic fan for sure.
Yeah.
Because like everything surrounding it was like, yeah, finally.
It was such a, I don't know, foreign is kind of a strong word, but it was not a familiar feeling for a long time.
Yeah, it was certainly interesting having that much unity in the fandom, like surrounding excitement for a singular thing that also looked promising. Because I feel like there wouldn't even be that kind of cohesion if they did like a remake of Adventure, I would say, because there would definitely be a lot of trepidation with like, oh, well, what are they going to change? Is it still going to be fun to play? You know, stuff like that. But with Mania, a lot of it was just like, they said everything that they needed to say to ensure that it would have been fun.
Yeah, pretty much. And like, part of that was a lot of the like Sonic fandom's awareness of the people behind it at the time of its announcement. Most people knew of Christian Whitehead just because of the Sonic 1-2 CD remakes for iOS and Android, with the Sonic CD remake also getting released on is it just 360? I think it was 360 and PS3 and PC. I think it was both.
Yeah, it was on everything, not the Wii at the time.
Yeah, and not the Wii U later either.
Yeah.
Though it wasn't like too far off from that being like a potential option. Most people knew Christian Whitehead from that, and then some people also knew Simon Tomley from also being involved in those Sonic 1 and 2 remakes, and just seeing those names in conjunction with the announcement of a new, like entirely new Sonic game was a huge deal.
Yeah, and Pagoda West being in charge of a lot of the game's visuals, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure a lot of Pagoda West is built by people who originally worked on the Sonic 2 HD project.
That's pretty much it. That's the core of the team as far as I know, and that's why T. Lopes is with them.
Yeah.
I've got like a few notes on these people because I think it's interesting to like look at where they actually came from, because like I said, a lot of people will have known Simon Tomley and Christian Whitehead from those remakes, but they got there for like a handful of like good reasons, and they already had notoriety in smaller developer focused sects of the Sonic fandom before they were even on board with these projects. Taxman I know less of because I was more involved in the ROM hacking scene than I was in the fan gaming scene, but like he was involved in a couple of projects, the most notable one being LTASonic, where he was responsible for developing the engine that it ran on. And at the time, God, I want to say like 2003, maybe 2002, could have been a little earlier or a little bit later, when LTASonic was released. it was the most accurate Sonic fan game mention that had happened to date. And we've done a lot better since, but like he was really notable at that time for that.
Yeah.
I haven't really gone back and played that, so I don't really know anything about Retro Sonic, but it it's a formative thing. It's important. It has its place in history. Simon Tomley's an easier grab for me because he was on the ROM hacking side. He did 3 really notable things, in my opinion. There were a couple other things that are like listed on his like, here are all the ROM hacking things that I've accomplished page on Happy-san, which is a website run by Sanosu, I think. But the 3 major things I know are he did a Sonic 1 ROM hack that added Knuckles with his Sonic 3 and Knuckles gameplay, which at the time, there was this whole thing of like people believing that the Sonic and Knuckles lock-on didn't work with Sonic 1 because Sonic Team ran into issues with making the coding for Sonic for Knuckles climbing work on all surfaces, and also the game would crash when he landed on a conveyor belt while gliding. Neither of those are substantiated, but people still believe there must have been some reason that the lock-on didn't work, and Simon Tomley made this proof of concept ROM hack that lets you play as Knuckles with fully intact gameplay all the way through Sonic 1. So that was a big deal. The next thing was that at the time that Sonic Genesis, the GBA Sonic 1 port, came out, that was done by Dimps using the Sonic Advance engine, which was a really bad idea. It was rushed also. Simon made his own, I don't know if it was from scratch or port. It was probably a port job of Sonic 1, just Green Hill, to the GBA that plays perfectly fine with none of the weird collision issues and control weirdness that Sonic Genesis has. And then the last thing is Sonic Megamix, which is one of the biggest Sonic ROM hacks of all time. He was a foundational member of the Megamix team for that. So, like, all of that, and then I guess maybe Christian Whitehead or someone else he was working with reached out to him at the time of the development of the Sonic 1 and 2 iOS remakes to come on board for that, and that's how he got involved.
And now that Mania is all finished, they're all working on... Well, they're working as a new team. I don't know if they're all on there, but I know that a majority of the core Mania team is working at Morning Star, which they formed after the fact.
Evening Star.
Evening Star. Okay, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. It's named for the Knuckles Chaotix track.
Right. And they're working on, I believe, both a 3D game and a 2D game. I know at least a 3D game. I remember hearing about that. And I think beforehand, I remember hearing about a 2D game.
I think I remember hearing about that too. They're mostly talking about the 3D game they have in development. They're doing recruitment for that at the moment, I think.
Yeah, I figure that one's probably a more immediate project, or they're just, they probably need more staff for something like that, because a 3D game is something that you need a lot more people for, I would imagine. Mm-hmm. And with 2D, a lot of them are pretty much experienced with it just right off the bat, so I figure they can just jump into a project like that without much outside help if they really wanted to.
Yeah. As far as I know, the Evening Star team is Christian Whitehead led with a bunch of people from Pagoda West.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Pagoda West still exists. I haven't looked into it. I assume they do. I don't know.
I'm not sure, because I know they've done, at the very least, a small handful of mobile games prior to Mania.
Yeah.
Just in between.
I just don't know if Mania was their last thing before the creation of Evening Star. I probably should have looked that up. I'll pull that up, but those were the foundational members. Simon Tomley did not stick with Evening Star. I don't know if there's any sort of interpersonal reason, or if he didn't want to, or anything, because he goes by the developer name Headcanon, and all the info that I found on it has listed it as a developer studio, but I think he might be the only member, so it might be the sort of thing where he wants to keep that name for just himself as an individual developer, or he wants to keep it and build a team with it. either way, he wanted to hold on to that and not be a part of Evening Star. But I'm not going to like read too much into his intent there, because I just straight up don't know.
Yeah.
Looking up Pagoda West. They still have a website, and it's still up. So that's something. Yeah, so
at the very least, you could definitely tell. I guess I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but you can definitely tell what they worked on compared to what they didn't following the Encore mode DLC, because you know, as 2 pixel artists, it is definitely very easy to notice when there is a style discrepancy. And I think the credits also substantiate that. I mean, I think they hired on a new studio to work on the Encore mode DLC, and it wasn't just the same people at Pagoda West. So that's why Mighty and Ray look kind of, I guess, off is the way you'd put it.
Yeah, they look a little funky.
Yeah.
The other thing I would note there is that, like, I wonder who was in charge of the palette work for all the Encore mode levels, because most of them do not look good at all.
A lot of them are very orange and purple. They're very warm.
Yeah. Studiopolis's Encore mode palette is really strange, with the emphasis on orange and purple.
Yeah, I guess on that note, we could talk about the way that Sonic Mania's pixel art is handled, just like in general.
Yeah, like in general, because there's a lot there, both in the character art and the background art.
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of history behind the creative decisions that are actually kind of palpable. The one that I always stick to is just how European the game looks, just in general, which, for those who don't know, from my experience, a lot of people in the Sonic community, which does have a very substantial, you know, European demographic in it, which I think is due in part to the fact of the success of, I believe, the Master System in Europe, right? So a lot of them got used to dithering just based off the kind of games that were popular in Europe, which also utilized dithering, which I think was a lot of like Amiga stuff.
Yeah,
and
a lot of like Amiga and other computer systems that they had.
Yeah, so you'll find a lot of Sonic fan games. Just in general, it's kind of permeated through into the general Sonic fan gaming culture. Just utilize a lot of dithering in ways that are inspired by particularly European popular games. And that really bleeds into Mania, in particular in the new zones. You could definitely tell that there's some slight stylistic differences with how the new zones are rendered compared to the old ones. I think some of the standout ones are definitely like not particularly Studiopolis, but Studiopolis is definitely paletted very interestingly. But Press Garden is very European looking. I guess kind of Mirage Saloon, but like not necessarily. I think Mirage Saloon kind of meets in the middle because it also takes cues from unused level concepts from Sonic 2 and Sonic CD.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's been a while since I looked at Titanic Monarch, but you know, I think it's kind of, but definitely the standout is just said it.
Press Garden.
Yeah, Press Garden.
Yeah. I've always noticed that Press Garden and Studiopolis do the most hue shifting in their palette work compared to everything else.
Studiopolis.
Yeah, especially Studiopolis. Like, it's really noticeable with all the returning zone graphics. I noticed that, like, all of them got touched up. Every single zone that returned got some amount of touching up to the graphics, whether that's like Green Hill Zone getting the up-res to its background, or some zones like Hydro City and Chemical Plant getting extra shading, extra highlighting to specific tiles, but not like to a huge degree compared to like the character sprites that have gotten a ton of new shading. Their palettes have been hugely expanded, but like a lot of the zone graphics stayed mostly the same with touch-ups. And the Genesis Sonic games never did significant hue shifting for the zone graphics. They were all very like, this thing is this color. When it gets darker, it stays kind of that color. It might lean a little bit one way or another, cool or warm, but it's never huge. It's never substantial. Whereas the new zones in Sonic Mania, they have a lot more hue shifting. Like I said, particularly Studiopolis and Press Garden. Studiopolis bleeds very cool for all of its graphics as it goes dark, and warm as it goes up. In Press Garden, most everything gets tinted a little bluer, just period, as it gets darker. It's interesting.
Yeah. I think it's also worth noting that I can't really think of any old Sonic zones that use dithering much at all.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Sonic zones from the Genesis are just very clean looking, which I think is why the dithering stands out so much, is because you have the original graphics that really aren't touched up in the same way that the new zones are rendered just in general. So you get a lot of dithering in the new zones versus the old ones, which just get nothing.
Right.
And there is still that color discrepancy where, like, yeah, even though they did touch up a lot of things, Green Hill Zone still looks like Green Hill Zone. It's still the same color palette that you're looking at a glance. They didn't really change the core colors all that much in a noticeable way. But yeah, because the hue shifting in the new zones absolutely affects the contrast as well. I think they're relatively lower contrast compared to the original zones, which also makes them stick out more or less.
Yeah, I actually hadn't really processed that before, but I think you're right. That's interesting, because that is another qualm I have with Press Garden's aesthetic. For a long time, Press Garden was my favorite zone in the game, and I do still like it a lot, but it looks so different compared to the rest of the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely in part of the color choices, both from the level of where the colors go in hue and where they go in lightness.
Yeah, I definitely feel kind of similarly with Studiopolis, where it's a cool zone, and I can understand why it's the standout from the new zones in the game. But I feel like because it looks so different, and I can't really vibe with all the hue shifting as much, I feel like I'm kind of burnt out on it just for a whole variety of reasons.
Yeah,
and I think now Mirage Saloon is still sticking out in my mind as this is the zone. This feels the most like it is a classic
agree.
Sonic zone, lost to time, which it is. So it
is. It would have been cool if they could have worked in a little more of that. I think it's kind of unreasonable that some people had the expectation that all of the new zones, I guess Studiopolis aside, were going to be based in old Sonic Zone concepts, since everyone who was particularly interested in a game like Mania, outside of just the purview of it being a new 2D Sonic game that looks like it's going to play good, were the kind of people who were heavily entrenched in knowledge about stuff that was left on the cutting room floor for Sonic games. And the culture around that time of people being very interested in making prototype versions of Sonic games playable, or taking the content from them and making that playable, etc., etc. I think that expectation placed on Sonic Mania at the time from that crowd is unreasonable, but it would have been cool to see more, because the people working on Sonic Mania were also from that crowd, and it's kind of surprising that they didn't implement as much as they could have.
Yeah, and they definitely did try. There is definitely a substantial amount of unused content that got implemented. There is unused content that was remade in Mania that continues to go unused.
Yeah, which is funny.
I definitely think that it's interesting, because I feel also different from a lot of people in the sense that I don't mind the returning zones in Mania as much as a lot of people do.
Mm-hmm.
Just because they're so different. They really feel reinvigorated, and it really helps playing them and making them feel more fun. I do agree that the ones that didn't get very substantial changes are relatively, less interesting, like Hydro City and Lava Reef. They're still basically the same. But the Sonic CD zones are unbelievable. They really went off when they made those.
I was waiting to get to these. These are substantial revamps, both and in visuals, in the sound department, in the level design department, and yet they're still so familiar is the best part.
Yeah, it's the way that they utilize the gimmicks that are present from other zones, like how Stardust Speedway has stuff from Marble Garden.
Mm-hmm.
It's all so clever and interesting, that I really want to see more of that. Like, I much prefer to see stuff like that than new zones, to be honest. Like, I think all of the things that I've mentioned kind of paint a picture for me with the new zones where I'm just not as compelled by them as I am the original zones, and seeing them be so touched up.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm okay with Green Hill Zone if the second act is going to be crazy.
Yeah. There was something I was thinking about a second ago that I forgot. I'll go ahead and mention something else though. I was going to say about Studiopolis Zone that like the more I sit with its visuals, the more I realize it's very monochromatic compared to most Sonic zones. Like
yeah, definitely.
It isn't all blue, but it kind of all feels blue.
Yes.
And that's weird. Like the only other stuff I can think of that's kind of on that level, even close, is like Sandopolis, which is a very, very yellow zone. But even then, they do a lot of work in the background by having the sunset colors in the background in Act 1 that goes very purple and contrasts really nice. Having a lot of black elements in the zone, which contrasts with the bright foreground all over the place. And then Act 2 with the black background because they're in a cave. Like, there's a lot of work that goes into certain particular Sonic zones that would otherwise be monochromatic that I feel like Studiopolis kind of lacks.
Yeah, absolutely. And it definitely boils down to the low contrast that a lot of the new zones just have in general, because it does feel very blue. It all just kind of comes together to just feel like as blue as it does, because like the way that a hue shifts and the lower contrast and the fact that the base color is itself like blue and purple, because it doesn't get particularly like red. There's only a little bit of like orange.
All the red's like reserved for those bumper poles, whatever they are.
Yeah.
The other thing I did want to mention, I still don't think it's the thing I was forgetting, but that's okay, was that kind of on the same train of thought of comparing Studiopolis to Sandopolis. I didn't even mean to do that. It's that like Sonic 3 and Knuckles is the game in the Sonic series that has like the most quote-unquote dithering, or like blending of pixels of different colors to achieve an effect in the series.
Oh, yeah.
But it does it super differently from the way it's approached in the new Sonic Mania zones, which I find really interesting. I always think of Marble Garden with its very, very detailed stonework that still reads well, even when you're not viewing it on an old CRT with whatever sort of blending and artifacting that would have from that specific TV. Like when you're looking at it pixel perfectly, it still looks like stone. It still looks like chiseled and shaped stonework and brickwork, and it's super interesting. But it's not like messy, and it's not super dithered either. It just looks like a texture.
Yeah, this is a very funny launching point. I was thinking about something earlier that I'll get to in a second. But the way that the dithering is in the new zones, I keep coming back to this, but it's fine. It is very modern, like standard checkerboard dithering. Like you said with Sonic 3, the way that game dithers, it's so hard to call it dithering, but it is. Because it is designed to look very differently on a CRT monitor, there's just a lot of stuff in that game that, like, some of it fares a lot better than others in terms of readability, in a pixel perfect image.
Like we talked about this when we talked about Sonic 3.
Yeah, I think we did. Angel Island and Sonic Mania looks completely different if you were to compare the tiles, especially for like the leaf work. In base Sonic 3, it's very rough shaping and dithering to suggest the idea of like a foreground of foliage and stuff.
Yeah.
But once you're pumping it through like a CRT filter, then like it starts to blend and it makes a lot more sense. In Mania, they know that even their CRT filter isn't doing that much image manipulation to really make that become apparent. So they smoothed it out a lot, and you can make out very like distinct individual like leaves and foliage and stuff like that. Just very clearly in very modern pixel arty kinds of ways. I guess that's kind of the end of it.
I'll never get over the change to the grass, personally.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It just changes Angel Island's identity in a weird way, because obviously the rest of the zone visually is still very recognizable, but dropping the like solid color, almost like mossy looking grass on top of the like almost wooden looking stone, dirt, whatever that's underneath the grass in the main tiling of Angel Island just gives a completely different feel.
Yeah, it definitely does. I think also the background of Angel Island in Mania feels a little lacking. It feels very green when I remember it, but I don't remember that being the case in Sonic 3, which might also be a contrast thing.
I think it's a contrast thing. Not to like super interrupt, but like I think the background was left mostly unchanged, and it's the fact that the grass has a different color on it that makes the foreground contrast it less.
Probably. It's probably also the fact that I would imagine, because it's like what, 2/3 of an act. They probably just didn't put too much effort. Well, that feels mean to say, but like they didn't have to put as much work into the background as they could have. This isn't supposed to be like an indictment. It's fine. You're playing through like 1/3 of a level. It doesn't matter. Yeah,
more of an observation than anything else. I think it's kind of true also, because like I think even in Act 1, Angel Island's background varies itself up more throughout the whole act in the original Sonic 3 than it does in the little chunky play of it in Mania.
Yeah, because when you get to the end where you find Mighty and Ray in the capsules, there's an open sky background, but besides that, I think it's mostly just the blank forest and maybe the sky.
I don't remember. I feel like since you're not really allowed to traverse the higher areas in the Mania version, you don't really get to see the sky, I think.
Yeah, I can't remember particularly offhand, but I do remember, everything I've talked about.
Yeah. I remember people were like excited for the Encore mode stuff just because you'd be able to play Angel Island, and then they realized you don't really get to. It's just a very, very, very brief tutorial stage.
Yeah, it's still cool.
Yeah, like it's neat. It's just people got a little too wound up over the idea that Encore mode would have actually one new level, and it didn't really. That's fine.
I think in the totality of Encore mode, we get to say it has one new level, and that's between Mirage Saloon Act 1 and Angel Island.
Yeah, I suppose that's fair.
These two half levels come together to become one whole new level.
I've got a huge jump off that I want to do, which is Mirage Saloon Act 1 for Knuckles in the main game is one of the coolest levels that's ever been in a classic Sonic game, and I want to play more stuff designed around Knuckles' kit specifically that isn't like specific one-off paths that lead to quote-unquote more challenging areas for him.
Yeah, that is definitely a factor of 2D Sonic that just doesn't really get explored, whereas it did in 3D, where like Knuckles could just have his own levels, and they could have done that in Knuckles Chaotix, to be honest, because pretty much everyone has some kind of flight. So it's kind of strange that they focused on verticality, but it's neither here nor there.
Yeah,
but it would definitely be interesting to see a Knuckles 2D game now with the kind of level design introduced in Mirage Saloon Act 1.
Yeah. I would even be fine with another classic styled quote unquote 2D Sonic game that gives some characters one or two exclusive acts over the course of the whole game. Like just little bits and pieces. I mean, that kind of goes hand in hand with I don't know if I've talked about it on the show before, but I've wanted for a long time a classic Sonic game where you don't go through the same set of zones every time, where there's some chances at the end of some zones for branching paths that take you to one zone or a different one. Like, those ideas I think would weave really nicely into each other.
Yeah, I think if we're going off of this kind of idea branch, I've definitely toyed around with the idea of having multiple exits per stage, and those send you off on your own branching pathway, so that way, like, if you stay on the high path, you go up to like a different level, but if you stay on the low path, then you go down to a different one.
Exactly. It feels like something that would be really natural for Sonic Mania anyway, given that like yeah, it has a save feature for a reason, but it's a Genesis style Sonic game. I want to play it in one sitting, and like Sonic 3 Knuckles was already really pushing the like how much energy you'll have for a single sit down playthrough start to finish, and Sonic Mania is pretty much in the same camp. They're fairly comparable in length, playing those two games, front to back, and like just shifting around some zones to be like, oh, you'll only fall into Hydro City if you go this particular way, or the flying battery will only pick you up if you end the stage here. Like those kind of ideas could have worked, not just to give the game extra replay value because you can take different routes and different playthroughs, but also to make it a little breezier of an experience that would be a little less overwhelming for first-time players.
Yeah, I think there could be something to be said for Sonic Mania being too long, but I think that's also like, this is an interesting direction for the conversation to go in, but I think it should be said. But when it came out, I recall a lot of people were like, this game is really hard, and some of these zones are really, really long, and I'm getting time overs, and this and this and that. And a lot of it was from people who are not as familiar with Sonic, but I remember in particular Flying Battery being a really big sticking point for a lot of people, to the point where it became like their least favorite zone in the game, even now. As with all Sonic games, it becomes more manageable as you play it more and learn it. That's kind of the point. So I think the length of Sonic Mania in general is fine. I do agree that I start to lose steam like after Hydro City or even at Hydro City.
Yeah. That's kind of how I feel too.
I think it also has to do with the fact that there's not really a driving motivator through the whole game. You just kind of go to a bunch of disconnected levels, and it's not so much as an adventure as Sonic 3 and Knuckles feels.
I agree with that. Yeah.
If you were playing the entirety of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, I would say you could do all of Sonic 3 in one sitting, take a break, do whatever you want, and then do all of Sonic and Knuckles, but it's also still very manageable to do it all at once. And I think Sonic Mania, well, first, not really having that, not that it would necessarily have to, but also just the fact that, like I said, everything's very disconnected. It feels like, oh, like, am I done yet? I'm here now. I don't know why I'm here. I'm suddenly like in a zone that feels like it would be at the end of the game. I'm not.
It is weird. Like the progression in Mania is, sometimes it does feel connected enough. Like you kind of see the points where one zone makes sense to go to the next, but most of the time it's really nebulous.
Yeah.
There was a time, maybe like a year after Mania's release, where I was like, the zone order is actually really cool and really well constructed if you look at how the zones were placed in the original games that they're taken from. And I think maybe some of those thoughts I had from that time are still like true to how the game was intentionally developed. Stuff like how Stardust Speedway is the sixth zone of Sonic CD, and it's also the sixth zone of Sonic Mania. How I've actually kind of forgotten most of them. That's just the one that sticks out to me. I had thoughts about like Lava Reef and Oil Ocean too, I think.
Yeah, I got on this branch subconsciously too, where like, oh yeah, the end of Sonic Mania is also like the end of their respective games, because like Lava Reef is basically the penultimate zone of Sonic and Knuckles.
Yeah,
I can't remember offhand how far in Oil Ocean is, like if that just goes right into Metropolis.
It goes right into Metropolis, which like almost feels appropriate. There is like there's like a little bit of connection between, or like comparison between Lava Reef and Metropolis.
Yeah, that does make sense. And then Metallic Madness is the final zone in Sonic CD, and it is the last one of the three that show up. So I guess, yeah, because Oil Ocean comes before Lava Reef, which comes before Metallic Madness, and that is equivalent to where they place in the original games, because with Sonic 2, you still have Metropolis and Wing Fortress and Death Egg.
Yeah.
And then in Sonic and Knuckles, you still have Sky Sanctuary and Death Egg, and then it's the end of Sonic CD. So I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess kind of going from that, though I do remember you said earlier there was something else you wanted to talk about, so hold on to that.
I haven't held on to it.
Whoops.
It's fine.
It'll probably come back, but I was going to say that like I do really like that Mirage Saloon to Oil Ocean to Lava Reef to Metallic Madness is like this little string of each zone foreshadowing the next one. Mirage Saloon on the train has one, maybe two cars that have oil tankers on them that say Oil Ocean, or they say OOZ, maybe. I think it say OOZ.
Yeah.
And then Oil Ocean. What is it? What is it that connects Oil Ocean and Lava Reef? I knew what it was.
Submarine.
Oh, well, yeah, it's a submarine, but I remember it's the turret arms on the Act 2 boss, which are just the Act 1 boss from Lava Reef Zone, the original Sonic and Knuckles.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're right.
And then Lava Reef has those stompers that are from Metallic Madness Act 2 in the original Sonic CD.
Yeah.
I just think that's cute. I think it was intentional and it's cute. And I like that they took advantage of the fact that these zones are now themselves, but also mashups of other Sonic zones to do little nods like this.
Yeah, and the cool thing is that they're fun nods. Like, they are actively smart and interesting game mechanics in and of themselves, like regardless of the fact that they are also just callbacks. So it works on all fronts.
Yeah, honestly.
I think we have to address the elephant in the room finally and talk about Mighty and Ray, though. Like, come on, Mighty's got to be a little more orange.
It's so weird. Like, okay, I know how to start talking about this, because as the person who has spent like on and off a ton of time in the last 3 years working on kind of like a rework mod for Mighty's graphics for Sonic Mania, I've spent a lot of time analyzing the way the character graphics are done in Sonic Mania, and a lot of people have, maybe a lot is like overestimating, but a fair amount of people have qualms with Sonic's graphics in particular, and a little bit with Knuckles, for the coloring choices. Sonic Mania wants to be a very vibrant, poppy, like color popping game, bright colors, good contrast aside from on the new zones, and it mostly achieves this through the object and character graphics more than the background and foreground art, which it works. It does accomplish what they're trying to do. It makes the characters stand out really well, actually, which is nice. It is a good consequence. There's a positive word for consequence, but I can't think of it. Byproduct. Noun. Second definition. A secondary result, unintended but inevitably produced in doing or producing something else. A good consequence of them choosing to do that. And they accomplish this by making Sonic a bright cyan, pretty much. At least his lightest colors are that. And it has this hue shift to a deeper, pure blue for his darker shades. That's how they do it on him, and then Knuckles has the lighter pink shades on him. And Tails they kept about as orange as usual, but it's still like a nice bright yellow orange. So everyone pops. It's real good. They all stand out. And then come the Sonic Mania Encore DLC with Mighty and Ray as playable characters, and they take their color schemes primarily from Sega Sonic, where Sonic's art in that game is a nice, deep, pure blue. Mighty is this brick red, and Ray is this kind of sunflower yellow, a little desaturated, nice light yellow. And when you take a sunflower yellow and brick red and put it right next to bright cyan to deep blue gradient, a bright orange, a bright pink red, it doesn't look right.
Yeah, I also have noticed like the opposite scenario where a lot of people have made palette edits of, you know, the base cast for especially Sonic and Knuckles. And I feel like every time I see that, I don't really click with it. And I wonder how much of that is like me wanting things to look like how they look in vanilla, just like in general with like anything. I feel like I get particular about that sometimes, but like I've also tried to like futz around and see if there's any like, okay, well, what if I did this to Sonic? And I think because the way that the game's zone palettes are constructed makes it really hard to make those edits and for the characters to not feel suddenly out of style.
Yeah. It's
Which
Go
there's an
ahead.
interesting dynamic here that's been created between Mighty and Ray, the new zones, and Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles in the old zones with how they're presented, like how they look.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wonder if that factored into when the Encore team was working on Mighty and Ray, and they were like, "Oh, this is how the game looks." So
It's an interesting point. Something else I'll bring up color-wise with Mighty in particular is that Knuckles' palette in Mania isn't like direct one-to-one to his palette in Chaotix. He definitely leans even a little more magenta end of pink in Chaotix, but they're closer than Knuckles' palette is to like most other appearances for him. And so like using that as a comparison point, Mighty in Chaotix is a deep bright red with some pink shades here and there, but mostly a deep bright red to contrast with Knuckles in that game, which makes it like even weirder when Mighty is super desaturated near brown in Mania.
yeah, he's like 255 red in Mania, or not Mania, excuse me, in Chaotix.
Yeah, I don't even think it like looks great in Chaotix. I don't know if I've gotten to make this observation before, but even though a lot of the character sprites in terms of highlighting and shading are like a little messy and a little rough in Chaotix, they still look really good, and they have a lot of nice contrast, nice use of the shades for like delineating shape, for like showing shape of the characters. Mighty stands out in Chaotix for being really flat shaded with like a big, super messy highlight that goes from kind of like the side of his brow down the top of his shell and then stops, and it looks really weird. In fact, Mighty's sprites are actually undershaded compared to the other characters, because most of the shades that are in his palette are used for that highlight, and then it's just 255 red, and then like, I don't know, 75 red that's used for the shading on his shell. And like, that's it. It's super strange.
I have to wonder how much of that comes as an offshoot of the fact that his sprites were edited from Sonic's.
I figure it has a lot to do with it. I just don't know how much, because they are heavily reworked. A lot of them even were clearly redone with like either use of a 3D model or reference to one. And we can see this because of the Sonic the Sonic Crackers prototype for Genesis that they worked on before development was moved to the 32X, where like we can see Sonic's like balancing poses. They're clearly drawn by hand, and they use like the exact same face unmoving, the exact same torso unmoving for all three frames, both animations. Whereas Mighty has a lot of movement in the face and torso and like rotation on his balancing animation in Chaotix. So I figure those were done more three-dimensionally, whether it was actually pre-rendered or just using a model for reference.
Yeah, I wonder how much, just like in general, Sonic 3 and that game's use of 3D models and like a faux pre-rendered look for all the characters affected the series in that era.
Yeah, really. It also like makes for a neat contrast to the way that Mighty sprites were done in Mania, because while a lot of the sprites I think look off model, aren't consistent with each other, just look kind of strange in general, his balancing animations are really really well done and smooth. They take what is like this kind of somewhat awkward 1-2-3-2 frame teetering animation and turn it into this animation where he's like flailing his arms in a circular pattern that's like interesting, and does it all in like 7 frames. And it's such an interesting juxtaposition, because they had to do his face in a way where he actually looks drawn instead of rendered, and it just works surprisingly well. It adds a lot of character to something that was a lot flatter. But those are kind of the standouts, honestly.
And then there's Ray.
Ray's really weird in Mania.
Isn't he bigger than Sonic?
His head feels bigger than Sonic's head.
Yeah, even though it should for all accounts. Because, like, yeah, definitely. Like, because I think if memory serves, his body is smaller, but then his head is still the same size.
He reaches the same height as Sonic. Like, their eye level is the same.
Okay.
I think the Encore dev team, the Plus dev team, were like trying to stay true to Mighty and Ray as Sonic edits, Sonic adjacent designs in terms of animation and appearance from Sega Sonic and from Chaotix. And I still feel like that was the wrong move.
Yeah.
Like, even if it has some sense behind it, it just feels like minimizing to their development as individual characters within, I guess now, the classic Sonic universe.
Yeah, I think also there's more clever ways that you could pay homage to that, just in general, with their designs. Because the Sonic Mania base sprites are heavily based off of how they look in Sonic 2.
Mm-hmm.
Just like in general, so like especially Sonic, you could tell he's just the Sonic 2 sprite, but with more shading. And that sprite is very stark. It is definitely the most sharp, well-defined Sonic sprite, I think, of that era. Because the Sonic 3 one, because it's trying to look very pre-rendered, it comes off as a little lumpy.
Mm-hmm.
But the Sonic 2 sprites are very noticeably 2D, which lets them get away with a lot more interesting things with some of his animations. And that comes off especially now in Mania, where their animation budget is insane.
Yeah.
So that feels especially weird for Mighty and Ray when they could have easily had just, made them taller or something different. And it's still, just by nature of the sprite style, it still would feel very, like, striking and distinct.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Sonic 2 sprite designs are very close to, like, the Sonic 1 concept art. So there's just a lot that could have been done there that just kind of wasn't.
Yeah, you really get the impression that a lot of the stuff for the Plus DLC, art-wise, visual-wise, was on a significantly tighter budget and time frame.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they really downscaled a lot of the stuff they could have done with it. I'm glad at least that both characters play interestingly.
Yeah, they managed to give, Mighty, because Ray hasn't ever been in a 2D game prior, but they managed to give him a new moveset that just isn't his existing one, which is strange and interesting.
Yeah. I guess, like, if you want to be meticulous about it, you could say it's true of Sonic also, and it's really only Tails and Knuckles who play the exact same they've always played. But
yeah,
so we're used to Sonic kind of having a variable moveset at this point.
Yeah, definitely. And it does feel like the drop dash is something that feels distinctly Sonic-like and really calls to his play style, which the Insta Shield is awesome. It's still easily one of the best moves Sonic's ever had, but, like, I don't think it necessarily speaks to Sonic, like, as a character and necessarily feel like a reflection of him. It's just a cool move. Yeah. So it's just nice that he has it. But the drop dash definitely plays to his strengths in a way that we haven't really seen before.
It also does this really interesting thing where, like, it puts a lot more of, like, the character's momentum in the player's hands than before. Like, you could always, well, from Sonic 2 onwards anyway, you could always come to a stop and speed yourself up with a spin dash. But, like, the ability to do that from a normal jump just brings so much more fluidity to the player's ability to build their speed up, which is really cool because it doesn't feel like it's, I don't know, it doesn't feel like it's losing anything. I think we've had this conversation before, but, like, there's a certain subset of classic Sonic fans who look at certain game design things as, like, whether they're overpowered for the player or not, because they're very, very into the meticulous details of how the original games were constructed control-wise and how they play. So they'll take little things like how you can't control your air movement from a roll jump in Sonic 1, 2, and 3 unless you insta-shield in Sonic 3, and treat that like it was this really big intentional design point. And like think of that ability to break the control lock from a roll jump as part of what makes the insta-shield what it is. Whereas Sonic CD and Sonic Mania are the two games in the franchise where you have full control for a roll jump. And it feels good. It feels really good. It feels really nice because you can then use spin dash jumps on off of inclines to make some really interesting trick jumps to get to places that seem out of reach. And obviously the drop dash feeds right into that. Like, the fact that it sends you into a roll when you land with it, and then you can jump out of it and have full control to do another drop dash to land somewhere. Like, all these different things, it just makes sense. It synergizes perfectly. So, like, I feel like there are some people out there who look at that option that the drop dash gives you and feel like, oh, that's too much power for the player to have in a 2D Sonic game. And I'm like, what? It's fun.
Yeah, that same feeling definitely extends to like the air dash in Sonic 4, or just like the homing attack in general. And it's always been so interesting how that's persisted as like just the idea that Sonic needs to be balanced in such a way when a lot of the fun is the freedom you get. And like having more options for freedom doesn't make it any easier to play the game like at a super high level. Yeah. Because I guess you're still doing mostly similar things. It just makes the game feel better.
Yeah, exactly.
And how is that not better?
And I think also just like that sense of control freedom feels appropriate for Sonic as a character anyway.
Yeah. It definitely helps that the drop dash feels a lot more fluid and intuitive than like homing attacking, or rather air dashing over and over and over to build up to max speed. Because the drop dash inherently encourages you to do the things that you do in Sonic, which is if you do the drop dash like right after you go, or right up on a slope, if it's going down, then like enjoy that extra burst of speed. It's going to do you a lot of good.
Yeah.
But you know, and then it's just good in general, keeping the pace up. If you're jumping around and trying to just immediately go back into moving relatively quickly out of maybe like a short platforming segment or something like that, it just helps. It just feels good.
It like, I think it's interesting because on some level maybe the drop dash encourages reckless play, but I think it manages to like get players in the mindset of thinking about what they're doing better than like any other Sonic mechanic that is encouraged reckless play.
Yeah,
which I find interesting.
I think the kind of reckless play that it encourages isn't also particularly dangerous. Yeah. So it's more like, here, you can have a taste of the speed you can acquire, and the challenge is, as it always has been, keeping that speed for as long as possible. And that's not easy unless you're good and you know the level. And that kind of speaks to the boost too, but the boost is definitely a lot more punishing, and it got very punishing in very specific aspects. I think it's actually, thinking about it out loud, the boost has always been very punishing. There's maybe like 1 or 2 games where the boost is just not as punishing, but like it's punishing if you don't know what you're doing in Unleashed, because Unleashed is hard.
Unleashed is really tight.
It's punishing in Generations because unless you know what you're doing, the controls are so freeform that you could just fly off in a direction you never even thought was going to be an issue. So like, I think in that way, the boost is almost too reckless because it kind of discourages you from wanting to use it because it's not particularly fun. It in some ways gets in the way of the standard platforming that you're doing on a moment-to-moment basis. But in Mania, the drop dash in tandem with the changes to the level design, like how there's no bottomless pits, it just helps a lot. It feels a lot more forgiving and friendly and intuitive in a way that feels encouraging rather than worthless or discouraging.
Right. Yeah, I totally see that. I think like the drop dash only really gets any kind of punishing if you make it all the way to like end game in Mania without really knowing what you're doing with it. Just because like you get into like Lava Reef, and there's a lot of places where you can just roll off an edge into either into lava or onto spikes. There are probably spots in Studiopolis and Stardust Speedway Act 2 where there are bottomless pits at the bottom where like you could get into some hot water if you're just drop dashing everywhere. And also Flying Battery, which is probably another contributor to why people had a lot of trouble with it on launch.
Yeah, Flying Battery also starts with the same thing that it started in the original game, which is a monkey bar section over a pit, which is not beginner friendly in the slightest. And it's harder in Sonic 3, because I'm pretty sure in Mania you can jump off of those in a ball, and you cannot do that in Sonic 3.
That's true. Yeah, you jump off in a ball in Sonic Mania. That's funny to think about. And
the spinning barrels also work.
Yeah.
They don't really in Sonic 3.
Yeah. Kind of a bigger point for just like 2D Sonic games, or just Sonic games in general that have multiple playable characters and not specifically Sonic Mania. But a lot of people point out over the years that there are some negative drawbacks to Sonic being like the title character and also often being the most difficult character to use, or like the character with the fewest options in a given platforming scenario compared to Tails and Knuckles and sometimes other characters. Just because, Tails is the beginner character in all of 2D Sonic that is playable, except for the original Sonic 2 where he couldn't fly. But like in every 2D Sonic game where you can play as him and he can fly, he's really helpful because you can skip over difficult platforming. You can save yourself from falling somewhere you don't want to fall because you can just start flying mid-jump. Similar but different for Knuckles also. That gives them a lot of usability for people who are trying to get used to how to play Sonic games. Whereas like playing with Sonic, you don't have that kind of safeguard. And I think that's also why like Flying Battery as the fourth zone is a real tricky one, because a lot of people who are playing Sonic Mania for the first time, especially if they hadn't played any older Sonic games anyway, will go for Sonic because he's the character. But they'll find themselves without a lot of options when confronted with like an actual platforming challenge other than doing it.
Yeah. I have to wonder though, because part of me feels like whenever I recommend someone sit like, oh, is this your first time playing a Sonic game? Well, maybe you should play as, Tails. I feel like getting that base level experience with Sonic, there really needs to be a character who has more control. And I mean as in they have a lot more control over their momentum than anyone in the current cast, in a similar way to like how characters in Freedom Planet plays, where it's not as unforgiving.
Yeah.
Trying to get used to the momentum and having it take you where it wants to go. Having a character that doesn't have or has more will over where they're going at any given moment, I think would definitely help a lot more than Flight. And I guess that's a good thing for like a character like Amy to have, where she would be less momentum oriented. I know a lot of people like her being a more technical character, and we've talked about it in earlier episodes of the show. But I think it could be interesting to have her be kind of a beginner character who has more standard platforming mechanics in such a way that like going around and doing Sonic-y things with her isn't as straining.
Yeah.
To manage and think about.
Yeah, I think it'd be really interesting. Hold that for 1 second, because I wanna keep going forward with talking about Amy specifically, but I wanted to mention that talking about beginner stuff with Sonic actually reminded me that Mighty is almost a better beginner character than Tails in that way, since being added to Mania.
Absolutely.
Because obviously he has his protective shell, which one deflects all projectiles, like basically every projectile in the game, whenever you're rolling, whether that's jumping or on the ground, and protects him from spikes and all this stuff. It's really nice for dealing with most hazards in the game, but also his hammer drop basically lets you stop on a dime. Like, if you're going really fast, you'll have a little bit of forward movement with it, but for the most part, it's just a stop wherever you want button. And while that's not as useful for a first-time player as anything that lets you like confidently reroute your momentum, without it being like a hard shift like Ray has with his gliding, or Knuckles with his gliding, it's still a really useful tool, because a lot of players can like jump into Mania for the first time, pick Mighty, get to a platforming section, even like Green Hill Act 1, where you can go on the floating platforms up to upper sections, and if they feel like they're going to miss the jump, they can just hammer drop right then and land on the platform, do it again. And it's slower, but it's methodical, and it's controlled, and they can feel confident in it.
Yeah.
Mighty's really good for that, which is surprising.
Yeah, it is definitely surprising. It's surprising that Ray is like the hardest character to control in the game.
Seriously.
I think, because you're right, what you said about Mighty is right, but I think the sticking point that I can see people having is having to play that methodically is kind of completely contradictory to the point of Sonic. It's not an issue with Mighty, but it speaks more to the fact that there's not like a real beginner character in Sonic.
I agree. So like that idea of Amy is really interesting. I'd like to see what any dev team working on a Sonic Mania 2, should that ever happen, would do with Amy, because she's the obvious next character to add.
Yeah, I remember when Mighty and Ray were added, a lot of people were like, well, where's Amy? Because she's like the fourth one, as, you know, we just talked about. But it makes a lot of sense to add her, and she would have absolutely been a more compelling choice, ironically enough, than Mighty and Ray, because Mighty and Ray are still very derivative. And Amy doesn't really have a concrete playstyle, especially not in the classic era. So coming up with something for her would have been very interesting to see. I think that's what a lot of people were hoping.
Yeah, it'd be a real chance to get inventive, which I think they still did with Ray. I think people were very surprised that they implemented like sort of Super Mario World cape flight style gliding for him.
Yeah.
The other thing is that like I'm sure we'll talk about this more sometime when we feel like we want to sit down and discuss like Mania Adventures itself. But when they added on that last little short for Mania Adventures, the Christmas time, that had Amy with metal, people were like, "Oh, Amy's part of the classic cast again. Like they're really doing it." And then didn't do anything with that games wise. Like she's been a part of any sort of like classic Sonic media. They did for Archie, and they did for IDW, the spin-off stuff. But otherwise, like they clearly want to include her, but they haven't done that in a game yet. So it feels kind of fluffy. I don't know. I don't really know how else to put it. It's really nice to see her with the rest of the cast in these situations, in modern depictions of these characters. But we haven't gotten the chance to play as her yet, so she still feels like she's not fully connected to the game experience.
Yeah, I think on that front, that's probably the biggest push I feel for like wanting another classic 2D game, besides the fact that they're just fun. I would love to see everyone in Mania and Amy, and maybe even other characters. I feel like a classic Sonic game is just ripe for adding a bunch of characters, and they just kind of don't do that.
Yeah.
They kind of have to catch up to the fan games on that one. It is a little surprising that for Mania Plus they added Mighty and Ray and then not a third character, just to, you know, parallel the initial three.
Yeah.
Because you know, I guess it's not really like a pattern. Like, oh, it's really weird that they didn't. Why? Because everyone has a parallel in base. Because like they don't. It's not really how it works. But like, you know.
Yeah.
But at Amy.
It's nice to see the character count double.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of funny tangential thing from that too. People were absolutely expecting Amy also for the game, or were thinking that Amy was on the table and then off the table at some point in development, because well, you know how like every game gets data mined these days, like immediately.
Yeah.
One of the first things people noticed when digging through Sonic Mania's files post launch was the little graphics file that has the signpost graphics for every character had Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Sonic again, and Sonic again. But next to the second and third Sonics were what looked kind of like hastily scribbled A and M's, or M and A's specifically, was what people saw. So they were like, oh, Metal Sonic and Amy. Oh my god, were they going to be playable at some point? Turns out that A was an R, and it just didn't look like it. Like, the idea was always to add Mighty and Ray. That was their intent from at some point in development before the game was out. But because everyone saw an A, like, that idea was unshakable, especially without the devs speaking to it, which they weren't going to.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting that people had that expectation set up and then no follow through.
Yeah. I completely forgot about the hype around having Metal Sonic, because Metal Sonic would absolutely be a cool character to add too.
Mm-hmm.
So they really do just have their pick of the litter for a new 2D Sonic game, to just add a bunch of new characters like Amy and Metal. You could add all of Team Hooligan.
Yeah.
You do whatever you want.
They're like...
Could bring back the Chaotix.
Yeah, that would be nice. It seems like current Sonic team is happy to include the Sonic the Fighter's Sonicified Honey from Fighting Vipers as just a classic Sonic character these days, which is funny too. Like,
yeah,
the chance that we would ever see her again.
That would absolutely be interesting to see her have a 2D playstyle.
Yeah. You know, food for thought.
You know.
Sonic Mania 2 is like, it seems at this point like it's really not on the horizon, which sucks.
Yeah.
I really want it. I really want just like another 2D Sonic game. It doesn't have to be Mania 2. I want another 2D Sonic game that like takes that gameplay style and that play style and just does things with it. I just want that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the sentiment that I don't necessarily think it has to be a Mania 2. I don't want to say I think they'll make more 2D Sonic games at some point, because you never know with Sega.
Yeah.
I would think that they would make more at some point. So ideally it's just a matter of time.
Yeah. It's weird to think that like 2021 was intended to be another year of Sonic from Sonic Team, and they've really done very little with it.
Yep. 2022 is the real year of Sonic. It's got postponed. I just hope it's worth it. I'm getting antsy. Yeah. It's getting to be that kind of break between Sonic things again. It happens.
Yeah, it happens.
I think it's happening especially now because there are things on the horizon. It's just the horizon is kind of far. But we're close. We're close to the end of the year. Who knows?
Yeah, we also just don't know when in 2022 we're getting that Sonic game.
Yes, absolutely. Either Sonic game.
Oh yeah, that's true. You know, I just straight up forgot about Origins Collection for a while.
Yep.
Don't even know when that's coming. Probably, hopefully earlier in the year.
Yeah, I figured that'll be the earlier release, and then 2022 might be like August, September, leaning towards the end.
My god, you're right, because I forgot about Origins Collection. We've got Sonic 2022, and then we've got the Sonic the Hedgehog 2 movie, like...
Oh yeah, and the show. Wow.
That's a weird moment. Like, It took having this conversation for me to remember there's actually a lot of stuff coming up. It's just we don't know when we're expecting it.
Yeah. Well, it'll be Sonic 2020 Tuesday.
God. It is disappointing that Sonic 2 movie is not premiering on a Tuesday.
That's true. Yeah, you're right.
Oh well, missed opportunity.
Yeah.
I'm Crepe. You can find me on Twitter at CrappyBlue.
I'm Mitt. You can find me on Twitter at MitsumiMario.
Thanks for listening to the episode. We love this game. It was so easy to talk about this for an hour plus.
Yeah, true.
I love Sonic Mania. If you love Sonic Mania and you love this thing that we do that is tangential to Sonic Mania, a game
even
that
if you love us, just us as people.
If you love us, please, if you love us, you will go to LTASonic.carrd.co and you'll listen to more. If this is your first episode, that's a great opportunity to go and listen to more that we've put out.
We have so many now. There's so many episodes.
So many episodes.
And if you really, 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 really want to help us out, then you can go to patreon.com/LTASonic and you could throw some money for some exclusive content or something.
Or something.
Yeah, it's fine to call that or something. We have things on there.
We have things on there.
Yeah, we have some things on there. There you go. You know, we also have some things on our Twitter, twitter.com/LTASonic. We just, we got the brand out.
And we have a Discord server where you can come and hang out and talk about Sonic with us in text.
Yeah.
I think that's fun also.
And links to that are on the website and on the Twitter.
It's so accessible. It's so easy to find.
Yeah, you can just hop in. We're talking about Sonic right now.
Honestly. We
Honestly.
really are.
We are technically talking about Sonic in the Discord server as we speak. So,
that's true.
gotta say, we've got you guys there.
Yeah, kind of got it covered. I don't think you can fault us for any of this.
Yeah. You know what you can do instead?
And what you should do?
We could see you in the next zone, which will have remixed things from other zones. But it'll be the next one anyway.
Yeah, it'll be the zone you're expecting. It's just it'll have some new elements in it. Look forward to it.
Yeah. Spoilers, it'll be Stardust Speedway Zone.
All right, well, there goes next week's announcement.